My question is for Steve. You made a statement saying that the 401ks are a disaster. However, the defined benefit plans were not exactly the greatest thing going because unless you worked for the government, there was always the risk that the company would go bankrupt, or the fund would be underfunded, or you could lose your job just before, maybe 10 years before retirement, where your benefits would be relatively modest. So what would you suggest to resolve this type of problem?
That is a hard question. No, there's no question that the defined benefit institution had a lot of issues. Some of those were addressed in ERISA, some were not.
What is ERISA?
Excuse me, that's the Employee Retirement Security Act of 1974, which was this major piece of legislation which tried to address a lot of the problems in the defined benefit.
And regulate these private pension funds.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Defined benefit. In terms of the 401ks, I think we need to come up with some way in which different cohorts can share investment returns somehow. That if you're lucky, you actually give some to the people who are unlucky, that through some mechanism. It's not going to be the easiest thing to develop, but I think that's important.
Are people working at that these days?
They're beginning. They're beginning. I think the drawing an income out of a pile, there are a lot of people working on that. A lot of the private sector, I'm not sure we're going to come up with something that's very attractive, that's not expensive. That might be better done through some sort of a mandate that you can get good annuity rates. But right now, the best annuity you can buy is Social Security. That basically you should all of you out there, don't claim until you're 70. That's the best annuity you can buy. You can't get anything like it, and I can go into it. But once you run out of that, then you're going to have a hard time getting a regular, reliable income, either by drawing it out or commercial products. It's a hard and expensive thing to do, and it's an unsolved problem. And I would like to work on it and then come back and give you some solutions, but I don't really have too many.
Okay, who's next? Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. One of them, the comments regarding the fact that people who are on unemployment for a long period of time are going to crack the system, and basically they're going to not work for a period of time because of it. Now, when you talk about the maximum payment being $653 a week, and most people are going to be getting 50% of their salaries, and they're running, if they have a family, I mean, what incentive is there to continue collecting? It might happen in certain cases. I mean, the argument came out during the discussions when the government was going to increase the number of weeks. And the House of Representatives, in their great wisdom, the arguments came out, the same idea. If you give people more insurance, there's no incentive to go back to work. And it may happen in certain cases, but I think it's a lame argument. So when you're really trying to say, well, we're going to go from 30 to 26 and change all year, the idea of Social Security, of course, is the way Steve explained it, as a fact, is to provide people with enough funds to be able to continue their lives in some manner. But if you're going to start dropping it doesn't work out. The other thing I take exception to is we talk about averages of states. We talk about Massachusetts runs 41%. In terms of the costs of running a business. Now, I'm not a statistician, but if you took out Alabama and Utah and Mississippi and Georgia and South Carolina from that and took the industrial states, where does this state fit? Because our needs are a heck of a lot different than what they are down south, where you've got people who really feel as though the government should not be involved in anything. So I think the comparison there doesn't really work. And the fact that AIM, I assume, is a lobbying group as well, and representing the industries in the state, similar to the way that Chamber of Commerce would be representing businesses at the same period of time. So, I mean, that's generally the comments. I'd like to see what answers would be.
Rick, but let me say this to you. Don't make the mistake of assuming that people in the South don't think the government ought to be involved. try to take Social Security and Medicare away from them. Of course, some of them don't even know that the government is
I don't
responsible.
mean the people there, I'm talking about the politicians, the House and
Fair
the
enough.
House of Representatives.
Even they, but you know, some of these Tea Party folks who have been arguing with the government how to keep its hands off Medicaid. We have an education job. But anyway, quick, response to those.
So those are all good comments and observations. And just, I will acknowledge right in front of you, we're a business lobbying organization, so clearly I am here representing the interests of the members of our association who are employers, so they do have a particular perspective on these issues. I was hoping to present them as options that should be considered in terms of changes to some of these programs. But clearly I've been there 20 years. I do have a little bias. But your comments about a couple of things. I do agree with you that Massachusetts is a high wage state, and I think we're all happy about that. That people here earn high wages, and that does make us a high cost state as a result, because when you think of wage replacement programs like UI or workers' comp or some of these others, if you're replacing wages that are high, well, naturally, those programs are going to be more expensive. I will tell you that in workers' comp, though, we've struck, I think, the right balance where labor and the employment community are pretty happy, and we're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of the cost of that program here in Massachusetts. So, things can be done so that we're not at the very high end of the spectrum. And then in terms of your comment about Massachusetts offering 30 weeks versus every other state offering 26, and that is one where I really think, we made a policy decision that we should just revisit, because in times of high unemployment, the federal government actually picks up those additional 4 weeks. So, we could bring ourselves in line with every other state. It's kind of become this symbolic thing for our members. Why do we have to pay more than my counterparts anywhere else in the country? When times are really tough, the federal government steps in anyway. So, anyway, just a few comments on some of the things you shared. I do get your point about, do we compare ourselves with Mississippi and Alabama and some other low-cost states? But the reality is we compete with all of them, and when companies are looking to expand and locate and have facilities in different parts of the country, we compete with the rest of the world, not only the rest of the country these days. And so costs, do matter.
Incidentally, folks, one of the interesting things about workers' compensation in this state is that insurance premiums are established after hearings before the insurance commission.
Yes.
They are very tightly regulated, and I don't think employers would want it any other way for obvious reasons. And about 40% of the cost, I think I'm correct in this, 40% of the cost of workers' compensation is health care.
Yes.
So our state insurance division already has extensive experience in regulating health costs as a result of their regulatory authority over workers' compensation. This is just an editorial comment, but under the circumstances, I don't know why we're fussing around with accountable care organizations and global payments and all this jazz. We've got an insurance department which has extensive experience over many years regulating health costs. Steve, at least that portion of it that's a substantial one that's part of workers' compensation, and since the insurance division has broad authority over health insurance premiums generally, I don't understand this extended debate in the legislature. I think the insurance commission ought to go to work and regulate those premiums, involving, obviously, providers and others who are very important to us, because we don't have a life sciences industry in the state for nothing. And as I've often said, if you want to get sick in Boston. There's no better place to get sick before you get treated. But we do have a history of regulating health costs as part of that workers' compensation system, and there are folks in the insurance division who are very knowledgeable when it comes to how you regulate health costs. And for the life of me, I don't understand why we haven't proceeded to use that expertise in dealing with overall health costs, which Steve will tell you have a lot to do with the rising costs of Medicare. Anyway, pardon my editorial comment. Who's next? Where's the microphone? Yeah, go ahead.
The question is directed to the former Governor Dukakis and Mr. Lord and Barry Glusman. Is it, how do you spell mass mocha? And it seems to me that it isn't, I mean, I'm presuming that it's still a success story.
Huge.
How do you, what do they do? And how do they manage to succeed in the face of international competition, never mind state competition from the South?
The gentleman from North Adams.
Okay. I'd be happy to do a little Mass Mocha advertisement. So, MoCA is the Museum of Contemporary Art. So it's the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art.
MASSMOCA.
That's right. As the governor said in his introductory remarks, it's actually in a sprawling former factory in North Adams, Sprague Electric, which when I was growing up is where everybody's parents worked. It employed about 3,500 people at its peak. It was textiles early on and went into electronic components later on. It made components for the Gemini program, but closed down in the early 80s and devastated the community. And you know, there were no other big employers out there that was going to pick up the workers who lost their jobs. So it had a devastating impact on the community. So the chairman of the art department at Williams College got together with the mayor in North Adams and came up with this idea to change it from a empty factory, and it's really sprawling, it's like 29 buildings, a big place, to a museum of contemporary art. So it's the largest museum of contemporary art east of the Mississippi. It's not only contemporary art, but performing arts as well. So on weekends they have concerts and dances and all types of other entertainment. And it has been great because it's attracted the Berkshires, you know, as the governor knows, because he spends a lot of time out there, you know, has a very big tourist industry. They have a lot of attractions in the arts. And so here was one more big one. And it's been very successful. I think draws over 100,000 visitors a year, and has really changed.
I think there are 200,000.
Maybe 200,000.
Rising rapidly, folks.
So,
I think, Rick, you might, or Mike, you might also add, it's not just sprawling. The art is big.
yes.
This is where you can put in installations that almost no other museum in the world could have. I remember one of the very first exhibits that I still love was the Uber organ.
Yeah.
You might describe that as, if you remember what that was.
I'm sure I do, so I'll let you describe it for you.
One of the artists was invited and was given a budget of like nothing, $4,000, to fill a room 4 times the size of this. And he tried to figure out, well, what could I do that fill a room like this, and what's the cheapest material I have? And he concluded it was air. And what he did is he produced this thing with gargantuan bladders and machinery that ran it, and it gives you this unbelievably deep organ sounds, and you walk through this exhibit. It was one of the first exhibits that went in addition to the trees that were upside down.
Yeah.
And you will never see this stuff in a normal museum. It's absolutely staggering.
Right.
Thanks to the governor and thanks to Rick Lord, we have such a spectacular.
I don't want to prolong this, but you must get out to North Adams.
Thanks for the question.
And thank you for the question. And let me just tell you my mass mocha story. To give you some sense of how do governors decide to support these kinds of initiatives anyway. Well, this governor, then a young state legislator, fell madly in love with the former Kitty Dixon, whose father happened to be Harry Ellis Dixon. Remember the first father of the section bus in New York, associate director of Boston Pops. And of course, the Dixons went to the Berkshires every summer, little Tyringham, south of Lee. And when I was governor, I used to kind of plan my summer weeks so that I'd always end up in the Berkshires on Friday. And in the morning, and Kitty would meet me up there so I could spend the weekend in the Berkshires. And we loved the Berkshires, and we continued to go out there. And I was one of those politicians from eastern Massachusetts that didn't think the state stopped in Framingham, which is what we and I was really very concerned about North Adams because it was looking more and more like a depression town. It was really bad, folks. And we had tried all kinds of stuff, and nothing was working. And I finally decided to create a task force, and I asked my guy in North Adams, who's one of the most prominent lawyers in town, John DeRosa, and the then president of North Adams State College, now the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, to head up this task force, take 6 months and come back to me and tell me what they thought we could do with this deeply depressed economy. And I got a call from DeRosa, who said, "Can you come out? It's coming Friday." I said, "Well, I'm happy to be heading to Berkshire, Jeff, we'll do that." And because I want you to meet somebody, he said. And so out I went, and it was unusually hot, even for North Adams. And I had a long, hard week. I was getting a little sleepy. It was about 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. Kitty had already arrived in Tyringham. And DeRosa ushered in this guy who was about 6'6" tall, this big, tall drink of water, who, I mean, really filled the room. And subsequently was the guy that was the genius behind the Guggenheim, Bill Bauer, and all this kind of stuff. At that time, he was running the Williams College Art Museum, not the Clark Institute, the Williams College Art Museum. And he walks in and he starts talking to me, and this cockamamie idea we're going to create an internationally renowned museum of contemporary art in North Adams in the Sprague Mills. So we had the week. I came back. I had a terrific development team. I mean, Rick worked with these guys, Frank Keith and Al Ray and all these folks, and really knew their stuff. And I said, "Okay, here's the proposal. What's it cost us?" Or maybe they did the analysis. We need a $45 million bond issue. And thanks to this guy and a few other heroes, and the work of our development folks and the legislature and the legislative leadership, which was extremely supportive, we went at this. I left office, Well came in, he killed it. We're not doing arts and crafts. I said, this is economic development, this and that. But there was a state senator named James Swift. At that time, who represented North Adams, and she kept hammering away, and the state legislator from North Adams, Dan Bosley, just worked it. And finally, Well woke up one day, about 3 years into this, and decided maybe this was economic development. So finally got behind it. I don't know how enthusiastic he was, but out of that has come this extraordinarily successful, not just a museum, folks, but an economic driver. So don't let anybody tell you that the arts are not themselves an important economic driver. They are. But this guy's 6'6" tall, talking to me about. And look, I don't even understand what this stuff is. I mean, when I first walked into the place, not only were the trees upside down, but there were motorcycles hanging perpendicular. Modern art. Well, now you can walk across the street of the Museum of Fine Arts, the Lindy Wing, and the place is loaded with this stuff. But all I can tell you is that a lot of people are going there. And that's a good thing, but it really is one of the great success stories. Rick's presence in that very important staff position was awfully important to us. Anyway, back to our discussion. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Steve. I'm Mary Kay Brown. I work at a state office on aging, and many of the programs that we have are designed to help subsidize vital, essential life services and long-term care, nutrition, housing, etc. for people who, for a variety of reasons, have not amassed enough savings or assets to tide them over. So I'd love to hear more of your insights as to how other Western nations incentivize savings across the lifespan, and your opinion on the idea of when every person at the age of 14 or 16 gets their first job, why aren't we setting up an automatic contribution to a personal IRA that they could tap into later, but somehow starting them, setting aside that money early so they can still fall in love with the Camaro, but just keep chipping away because of the aspects of compounding? Would that maybe help with this, rather than provide anti-poverty programs, try to prevent poverty in old age?
Right, I think that's I think the fundamental goal.
You all hear up there? Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the great virtues of social insurance is that it provides services out of a welfare context. None of us want to get welfare. None of us want to be means tested. We want to get what we need as a matter of our own savings or as a matter of right. And one of the fears that I think we have, if we let social insurance slip too low, increasingly we're going to be moving towards means testing. And once we move to means testing, as you see in other countries, it's a very slippery slope.
All of you know what means testing means?
Yeah, it means
Means you only get it if you're poor enough.
That's right.
Whereas Social Security and Medicare these days, everybody contributes, everybody gets it.
That's right. And if the benefits get very low, and what typically happens, then you get, okay, if you have $1 of extra income, we're going to take $1 away of benefit. Well, that's pretty terrible. Nobody's going to get that other $1 of benefit. So then you put a taper on it. I will only take 40 cents away. And the minute you only take 40 cents away, that means you extend the number of people in welfare much higher because the taper goes higher. And this actually happened in Britain. Right now, half the population is eligible for the elderly, are eligible for means-tested benefits at any point in time because they've shrunk their systems. And at any point in your life, it'll be higher because your income tends to fall as you age. And so there's a real trap that if we let social insurance get too low, we're going to be relying on means-tested benefits with all that bureaucracy, with all that dodging, all that disincentive to work and to save, all that financial advice to hide your means so you can get a higher benefit, like we have with Medicaid and long-term care insurance. So it's really a mess, and the more we can provide and assure adequate saving, either voluntarily through individual accounts, through employer-type programs, which employers are less interested in these old age programs, or through the government. But we do need to have, I think, a more systematic saving for old age, because it's lasting much longer. And also, we have to start old age much later. You know, old age doesn't start at 62,
No.
when you can claim your Social Security benefit. And you know, at least I think it's fairly predictable that the age of eligibility will rise. I think that's kind of a, what are we going to do? That will happen.
And in point of fact, has risen. I mean, it's in the process of.
It's rising the full time age, although you can still claim it 62.
Who would claim it 60?
A lot of people. A lot of people.
Kitty Dukakis would claim it.
And that's got to go up, and because we need the money when we're 82, not when we're 62.
Who's next? Yeah.
Yeah, one question for Steve and one for Richard. First of all, for Steve, I noticed your little book was published in 2007.
Yes.
Nothing has been done since then. How much does a year's delay cost in terms of what we're going to have to do down the road?
You know, I don't think it does that much. I mean, I've looked at, most of those projections are from the Social Security actuary. And while the exhaustion date is moved up, part of that is because of the recession and they're not getting the revenues and because people are claiming early, so they're pouring money out. What you have to do, they have what they call scoring with different effects. That hasn't changed that much for over the few years since that's been published.
And for Richard, in Massachusetts, can employers use unemployment insurance to compensate short-time workers? Certain workers can get 80% from the employer and then a little supplement from unemployment insurance? And if so, how many companies use them?
So there's a couple of innovative programs, one that already exists called work sharing. So work sharing is a program where an employer can not necessarily lay people off, but cut their hours maybe to 2 days a week. And the employee can collect some of their unemployment insurance. So it's a way for the employer to hold on to their workers, maybe if they're having a down, slow time, so they can't afford them full time, but the employee can still get some benefit and hopefully come back when things pick up. So that's work sharing. That's been around for about 10 or 12 years. And that works for some employers who have a slowdown in their business but expect that things will pick up at some point. The other thing, and we were talking a little about this at the break, our Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development has been talking about doing a pilot program where people who are currently unemployed could continue to collect some stipend, and an employer that hires them would be paid a stipend, So to encourage the employer to look at hiring somebody that's been laid off, not take the benefits away completely from somebody. You know, the other disincentive, frankly, from some people from getting off unemployment insurance is it's based on your most weekly wage, the wages you earned most recently. So some people who lose their job, and this kind of gets to your question, who are highly paid, they'll collect the maximum unemployment insurance. They take a lower paying job. If they lose that, their recalculated benefits are based on the lower amount. So it does provide some disincentive not to go back or to accept a lower paying job. But anyway, the state has been talking about a pilot program that will provide some incentive for the employer to hire this person and continue some benefits. So I'm hoping that that goes forward. I think, you know, the governor and I were talking before, or during the break, you know, we've got to be more creative about helping people get back into the workforce rather than just paying them replacement wages. We need to provide incentives and training and whatever we can to make them productive again. So
99 weeks, folks, is practically 2 years. And it seems to me that's just a terribly unproductive use of a lot of talented Americans.
Yeah, I just
Ought to have the opportunity to go back to work in some productive capacity a lot earlier than that. If that means some form of public service jobs or wage sharing or whatever, let's do it. I mean, I think it's appalling. People sit around.
Yeah, I just, one little observation that, a dual earner household is really in a very different situation in the event of unemployment than a single earner or a single person. And we see this in Social Security, that dual earner households have different kinds of Social Security benefits. And our systems have basically been designed on a single earner or single earner and a non-working spouse. And the fact that that's really not the way households are structured, that if you have a couple, chances are both are working. That means that the way their Social Security benefits are like I mentioned, that is bad in terms of replacing your income. On the other hand, if you have two people working and one's unemployed, there is that kind of insurance of that other person working. I just am wondering whether, like, our social insurance programs ought to be rethought based on a household basis rather than on an individual worker basis, because of the different kinds of households and their different earnings capacity. And what that would look like, I don't know.
yeah, it's a good question, Steve. I mean, that hasn't been part of the conversation at Beacon Hill as they've looked at reforms to our unemployment insurance system. I talked about some of the ones that have been under consideration, and it's more about curtailing some benefits or eligibility. But I think that's an interesting question that, you know, we should look at. Is it the same wage replacement regardless of whether you're a one-wage family or multiple wage earners in the family? Because, right, the income needs are very different. So, yeah, it's a good question.
Who's next?
I'm the one with the microphone, so I'm just next. Richard Giordano. I guess I have a request of both of you to comment on what I think is missing from both presentations, which is a slightly broader perspective. And I'd also like to throw in one fact that I'm one of the poster boys for some of the problems that you've been talking about. So I don't think the system as it is now is working very well, because I can tell you all about how it's not working. But the first part is, Mr. Sass, you know, in the opening picture where you gave us the percentage of federal expenditures on various items, I think what's missing from that whole discussion, which I admit will not put more money in the Social Security system, but it's how we spend our federal money to begin with, which is the amount that was not up there on defense, Pentagon, and the black budget for the wars. That's not even figured out anywhere because nobody knows what it costs. So it just, I think, is a slightly narrow focus when you put something up like that that doesn't talk about the bigger context that we're all swimming in. But I love a comment on that. But it's the same comment to the AIM. The bigger context is we ship jobs overseas. We have crazy federal policies that reward companies that don't pay taxes. Mass Mocha got built because that place was a disaster, in part because of competition against whom and how jobs move. So we have a jobs policy at the federal level that doesn't help us create jobs. It creates the disasters that you have to then make a Mass Mocha to fix. So I would like both of you to say something about the bigger picture that we swim in. But my point personally is, I'm 62, I've been out of work for almost 2 years. My unemployment benefits were $336 every 2 weeks. So let's call it $700 a month. My insurance, because it was COBRA and I came from the city of Boston when I got laid off, was $980 a month. The only reason I wasn't paying that is because there's federal stimulus money that knocked it down by 2/3 because the city got some money back for it. So I was paying $330, $350 a month on $700 in benefits. And I'm married, and my wife, God bless her, was working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet, so we didn't qualify for Mass Health, we didn't qualify for unemployment, medical benefits. So there's a huge hole in these things that we have now. So I understand that we have a fiscal problem, we need to figure out solutions, but let's not kid ourselves. I'm pretty privileged. When I was working at City Hall, I consistently used to pick up the phone to elderly people who had the choice between paying for fuel or medicine or food. So, you know, things are not nearly as good as you say. And I think unless we talk about the bigger picture, you can't focus on the solutions without admitting some of these other things that are going on.
I want to comment from each of you on that. Steve Lander.
Well, I mean, that's a big picture. I think just a little to unpack some of these issues. Like the current recession is really a really bad cyclic event that, you know, that's really not part of like a long-term program of, say, retirement income and making do. So we really have a very bad recession, and that really needs to be dealt with tools that we deal with recessions. And whether there should be a stronger safety net, I would probably say yes, but that's not my area of expertise. In terms of the elderly that you spoke with, I think that's also very true. That to say that this is the best that the elderly have ever had does not mean that all the elderly are in great shape. There are a lot of problems. Older widows are one big area of a problem, and we know that because of the way our Social Security and employer pension systems, they often get very much less than they should. So there really are specific problems that we have. But still, I think what's important to realize is that what's at stake is we might go down from where we are. And that's, I think, the issue that I wanted to raise, that we overall really improve the condition of the elderly through the expansion of Social Security and Medicare and the employer benefit pensions with all of their problems, that the elderly were no longer, it used to be the elderly were synonymous with being poor, and it's no longer the case. They have poverty, their poverty rates are comparable to younger people. The real problem are children. They're more poor than the elderly. So there are different segments of the population, and not all the populations are going to be uniformly in good shape. But it is good to recognize that there are specific problems that our safety net, our social insurance programs are inadequate, and I think that's something that we got from Mr. Lord's presentation, that these are difficult programs, that how do you design them so that you have the right incentives and the right supports, and there are all these different issues, and it's really very difficult to design them adequately. And they do make mistakes and do have problems. So that's the only thing I think how I can respond to those questions.
Rick.
So I guess I'll respond to your comment about the global economy, and I totally agree. That's changed everything in the last 20 years because the employers that are here in Massachusetts today, aren't just competing with, companies in North Carolina and Texas, but they're competing with companies in China and India, all over the world where, freedom, it's a lot cheaper. And, if the costs matter, if you're in an industry where costs matter, well, if you're gonna survive, you could have all the goodwill in the world and wanna stay in a place like Massachusetts, which is high cost, but, if you're gonna survive, you need to figure out a way to do that. And sometimes it's moving jobs overseas to take advantage of those lower costs, but other times it's adopting new technologies and increasing the productivity of your workers, and really investing in training, so that you can raise the productivity levels here, so that allow you to compete with companies in lower cost parts of the country. And frankly, that's one of the strengths that Massachusetts has. We do have a very highly educated workforce with a lot of great colleges and universities that turn out really talented young people. We'd like more of them to stay in the Boston area, but a fair number do. And it does allow us to compete. But I kind of I certainly understand your points about it. Certainly, if you're in one of these systems like unemployment insurance, it probably doesn't feel like the safety net is enough. And I guess my point of kind of raising choices we made in Massachusetts was just to highlight, we're one state, we make different choices than other places. They do have consequences, both for workers and employers. And I think we just, they're complicated, as Steve just said. You change one part of a program and it might provide an incentive that's good, another part it's bad. And we struggle with this every day to provide the adequate safety net and yet, make it affordable so that employers here can be successful. That's the balance we work with every day.
Can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
You seem like you're a capable guy. You seem healthy. I think what's very important for somebody your age, which happens to be my age, is that you don't think about retirement. You think you're unemployed. Exactly. I mean, basically, if you're 45, you don't think, oh, I'm going to retire. You're unemployed. You're going to go get another job. It's a rough economy out there. But you have skills, you have capabilities, and you've got another good chunk of time to work, and that's the only way you're going to be able to have a secure retirement. And so you will get another job, don't tap Social Security, you will. Don't tap that 401k, and if you have one, or your pension. Preserve those things, because when you need it, when you really are old, right now you're unemployed, which means you're in the labor market. And I think that's really an important thing for people to understand, because we don't have that many resources for old age, and you've got to preserve them for when you need them.
Just a quick note, we had a good discussion with somebody who's here who is an employer and is doing very well. Best year last year, best year in history. Why? Heavy export business all over the world. Small business, go regular. Less than 50 employees, doing very well. A lot of it has to do with exporting, so.
And an AIM member, I'll point out too. A successful AIM member.
Okay, who's next? Yeah.
I'd like to get your reaction to two ideas. One deals with the issue that Steve put up of retirees being subjected to the swings of the stock market, and they unexpectedly find themselves not having enough of a nest egg to take them through their life years. I've received a number of solicitations from insurance companies trying to sell me a product called longevity insurance. And for those of you who don't know, the idea seems to be that you give the insurance company a pot of money when you're my age or so. I'll be 63 tomorrow, and you get an annuity only after the age of perhaps, I think you could specify 80 or 85 years old or 90 years old. And the idea being that you really are buying insurance specifically for living to a very old age. If you don't reach that age, you just lose it. So the question is, what do you think of that idea? And should the government be providing incentives to buy longevity insurance? Second idea, it's my impression that there's a significant population of seniors, particularly in Massachusetts, who are living in much larger houses than they need to for their purposes. And should the government be somehow providing incentives to these folks to downsize, perhaps buy something smaller, perhaps rent, and perhaps maybe in Massachusetts encouraging people to move to lower cost of living areas within the state, North Adams from Boston, in order to help them
Chilly in the wintertime.
Okay,
in
now,
order to help them stretch their retirement.
on the two different things that to be done, I'd say yes and yes. I'd say longevity insurance is a very interesting product. It depends on what they would cost and so forth. But the real risk of running out of money, not entirely, but to a large extent, is the risk of living a long time. And so if you could basically say you're 63, 65, and you have longevity insurance that kicks in at 85, you have a safe harbor. And your task is, can I manage my pot of money for 20 years? And that's a much easier thing to do than, can I manage my money for the rest of my life when you don't know how much longer you're going to live? And there's a long tail of how long one might live. And the reason why those insurance companies can offer that product, or should be able to relatively inexpensively, is they've got 20 years to accumulate investment earnings. A lot of the people, as you say, are going to drop off before then. And a lot of the people that they're going to pick it up at 85 are only going to live for a short period of time. And the ones that, God forbid, live another 15 years aren't going to be that many. But if that's you, and that's what you want insurance for. You want insurance for a low probability event that is very painful. You don't want insurance for a very likely event that that all the rigmarole of the insurance, that they're going to do all this paperwork to deliver something that you know you're going to get. You want it if your house burns down, which is a low probability event, but it's very painful. That's what living a long time past 85 is. So it's a natural complement to a drawing down strategy. If you're not going to buy an annuity and you're going to draw something out of your money, this is your backstop. Those are complementary products. Now, getting to your house, I'm involved now in financial literacy and advice and all these things. The three most important things people can do to secure retirement has nothing to do with asset allocation, which is what you get on the news. It's how long you work. If you retire at 70 rather than 62, does anybody know how much more you'll get each month from Social Security? 40?
20%.
76. You'll get at least 76% more each month if you claim at 70 rather than 62. And it's a crime. It's a crime.
Until 84 or 88.
No, they can only go to 70. Only go to 70. But it's a crime that Social Security has not informed the American people that one little fact. That there's something you can do. If you can delay to 70, you get at least 76% more. That's number one. I'm not saying everybody can do it. If you delay 4 years, you get at least a third more. The second thing is to control your spending, to get your spending under control. That's much more important than saving more, even though it's exactly the same thing.
I've been telling Kitty that for 40 years.
I've been telling Ellen that. A lot of good talk does. But if you move to a system, but the third thing is using your house. Your house, for most people, is your biggest expense, and for most people, it's your biggest asset. Now, you're not going to go to zero, but if you downsize, you get a chunk of savings and you cut your expenses. And yes, a lot of old people are living or house poor, and the house isn't being maintained, and they're not going to blink with them attack. It's crazy. Now, whether there should be incentive or somebody ought to knock on their door and tell them, you can eat nicely, you can live nicely, because you know what this is costing you. I don't know how you get people to think rationally about their house. There's an emotional bond to the house. The house is also viewed as a reserve in case you need long-term care or medical. So there's a lot of issues around the house, but yes, living in a lot of their expense is that house, year after year. The taxes, the insurance, the upkeep, forget about the mortgage. It's insurance, taxes, and upkeep, that's enough. And the utilities that you're paying. But you don't see it. And yeah, people would be a lot better off. And what would also be good is it would free up those houses for younger people that need housing. So some kind of a circulation of housing would be very beneficial for all concerned.
But it is very emotional.
It's very emotional. And you know what? Being stuck in the suburbs in a big old house, to me, sounds like hell. You can't ever see anybody. You got to maintain this thing, and it's ridiculous. But yes, it's emotional. It's emotional.
Kitty and I had this discussion about 3 years ago. She had identified some rather expensive conduct in the neighborhood. I wanted me to take a look at it. So I went over there, and I didn't like it. Where am I going to grow my tomatoes? I can't grow them in the condo. Well, Kitty said, put them in pots. What kind of? I said, well, okay, we've got to redo the kitchen. I said, what's the matter with the kitchen? Not enough counter space. I've been cooking for the last 27 years. I said, how would you know? We redid the kitchen. Who's next?
One
Yes.
last question.
Last question.
Actually, I have two questions. One, Steve, and one of Rick. Steve, there are an awful lot of people who are afraid that there will be no Social Security left by the time they're ready to draw it down. So I'd like to hear what you have to say. Rick, as far as unemployment goes, Mr. Giordano, is that your name? He's 62. There is a real problem with people who are older and discrimination. It's called age discrimination in the workplace, and that happens constantly, and it's usually housed, hidden under, oh, you're just not a cultural fit. Part of it is compounded by the fact that you have also a younger workforce, and so the difference begins to be exacerbated. So the question is, what do you do about that one?
Steve?
Okay, about Social Security, in terms of its finances, the only financial issue is that the trust fund will run out. And at that point, it'll just have the payroll tax. And the payroll tax is good for 75 to 80% of promised benefits, pretty much for the next 75 years or even longer. So that's the financial system. So it's not going to vanish for that reason. The threat that I think could happen is, say if you have a carve-out individual account, which is what the president, former president proposed, well, that would basically push us into a means-tested system. Because if you carve out, you take some of your benefit, and you put it in your own pot, you'll have a very small, you can even have no Social Security benefit, but you have very little. And at that point, we have to have a means-tested system to provide a basic old age income, and very quickly we would end up with welfare rather than social insurance. So that could kill Social Security, that kind of a program. Or if benefits get very low, if we raise the full retirement age, but low-income workers continue to retire at 62. So they're going to retire in much reduced benefits, considering the fact that the full retirement age is much higher. So I think means testing is the real fear of Social Security, that somehow it will not be adequately funded or adequately limited to people who will have an adequate benefit. And so that's the real threat. It's not the fact that we're going to that the trust fund will run out of money. And people say that, and it's either stupid or it's brainwashed.
Or it's misinformation.
Or it's misinformation, right?
Steve, let me ask you a quick question though. As you know, there's a cap on wages that
Or tax.
tax. $116,000.
Something like that.
So if you're a millionaire, you're only paying the first $116,000. Why do we impose a tax on all wages and salaries and cut the rate and give 95% of the American people a tax cut? Why do we do that? I don't understand it.
Well, it's the nature of the system. The system is designed to be insurance. It's meant to look like insurance, like you're actually.
I understand. but-
And we can push that to some degree, but at some point, the illusion begins to lose its reality. And it's a
Maybe.
political concern.
One of the most regressive taxes we have, folks,
Um,
the payroll tax. Maybe not the benefits, but the tax. And I just don't
Yeah,
understand.
and actually, Social Security, the whole program is fairly neutral. The notion that poor people get a higher replacement is true, but they don't live as long, so the rich people make it up in volume.
Anyway, Rick, comment on it.
Yeah, your comment about unemployment and especially the challenges being faced by older people who lose their jobs, I don't have a great answer for you because I think you hit it right on. You know, if you're older and you've lost your job, unless you have a unique set of skills that employers are looking for, you're in a labor force competing with tons of other people. And, you know, the last 3 years, I'm glad I didn't or don't have kids that were graduated from college. I mean, the job market for college kids has been really difficult. And you can hire young people and pay them a lot less than somebody who's been in the workforce for 40 years and needs a higher wage to maintain their standard of living. So, you know, you're absolutely right. I mean, you pose a very good question. I don't think there's any easy answer. You know, we were talking a little at the break. I mean, I think we could do a better job of connecting employers to older workers. I don't think we do that very well. I do think taking some of the unemployment insurance dollars and providing training for specific skills, because we have members that say we can't find the right people, even in this economy with 7.4% unemployment. So I think we just need to think about these things a little more creatively, but I hear your point.
I think the real issue is you can train people, but if the employers are still kind of discriminating against older workers, it's still a problem.
Yeah.
It's the employers, and maybe there needs to be some incentive on the part of, to incentivize,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah, to hire older workers that bring actually a tremendous amount of intellectual capital and wisdom to the workforce.
You know, I do hear from some of our members that say they'd rather hire people who are older because they think the work ethics of a lot of young people are not nearly as good as people who are older. The work habits and all of those things that people who've been in the workforce a long time have. So, you know, we have members that actually think you're right onto something, but it's a challenge.
I just want to say, I wrote a book on older workers, looking longer, and one thing that we propose, and actually I think it's a state initiative, is that older workers, which by now are a major part of the workforce, and they weren't when the baby boomers were under 55, but now they're over, it's a very big piece of the workforce, and they're different from younger workers. They have some skills that are better, that tend to be more reliable, more work habits, they know how to deal with people better. They have other things that might not be as good as younger workers, maybe flexibility, being able to bend and lift, things like that. And employers need help in how do you use older workers more effectively. A lot of that times it might mean changing your production system, changing what you do. Maybe you'll do more sales and less product development. You have to change perhaps your personnel system. Healthcare costs could make an older worker unemployable, so maybe you make them pay more of the cost so that or do something like that. And just like, and Arizona had a summit, and the employers wanted really management consulting on how to employ older workers. How do you change your production system, your personnel system, so that you can make use of this resource, which right now is an underutilized resource, so that the employers that can make use of this have a competitive advantage to the ones who don't. And the fellow, the manufacturer, who he benefited from some kind of state assistance in certain kinds of manufacturing techniques, is something that states do. They do provide management consulting, And given the fact that we have an older workforce, it seems that this might be something very useful that a state could do to help employers understand how to use this resource.
Maybe it needs to be an affirmative action.
Well, I mean, I think when you go to incentives and penalties, that gets people nervous. But when you, if you can just basically show them the advantages, I'm not saying that could be a better approach to show them how it's in their interest. That's
62 sounds awfully young to me. Once again, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. A special thanks to